All right, here we go. This is my first ever Facebook Live. Someone asked me recently, as a homeschool mom who's graduated too and been homeschooling since the beginning, so over 13 years, what do I do or what do I suggest for teaching science and history when the parent themselves feels like they don't enjoy it and they didn't learn it well themselves? And that's a great question. I did not receive a robust education in the science or history department, so when I started homeschooling, I was pretty intimidated about teaching those subjects in particular. So I'm excited about showing you the things that we've used that we really enjoyed. We'll start with science. A few things that I found to be quite helpful along the way are, I like these Draw Right Now books for the elementary level. Draw Right Now books have, I guess this one's more of a history one. Lots of animal themed ones, and when you go inside they'll give the kind of a step-by-step. And so if you, let's say you go on a nature walk and you come home and you want the kids to draw something they remember. Some kids feel really inspired to do that spontaneously on their own, and some need a little prompting. And so my kids enjoyed drawing from these books. We got them little notebooks that had kind of a blank area and then some lines. And so they could draw either something from their imagination, something from a recent nature walk, something from a recent reading session. And if they're proficient writers, then doing some sentences. If they're not quite there yet, then having them dictate to you what they want to write, and then you can write it for them. Or also you can write it for them on a different sheet of paper and have them copy it, and it becomes copy work. So whether it's dictation, copy work, or their own original work, just as long as it's still fun for them and enjoyable. The Draw Right Now books are great. And now they've also come out with some that are a little bit more, have some history themes. So this one has like some North America and Native American themes in them. And so depending on what you're studying, you may find something inspiring in these books as well. Other cool resources. Usborne produces some amazing and beautiful books, all kinds. They have children's dictionaries and science, human body discovery. This one of my sons is really into inventions and entrepreneurship, and the story of inventions is great. It talks about just different inventors, different inventions, how they came up with the idea, some of the science involved in why those things work, and television, records, science of sound. This is a great one to just hand to your kid to enjoy if it's their interest. If it's not their interest or they're just mildly interested, then it would be a great one to read together, maybe a 2-page spread 3 days a week, and then looking for that invention around your house or talking about it, playing around with it. Again, at the elementary level, those are great. It's just about exploring the world around you, asking questions, being curious. You can get into more in-depth science studies. One of the ones that I really enjoyed was NOO Science, N-O-E-O, NOO Science. That curriculum uses a lot of books that come as a kit, different Usborne books, and they will help you. The teacher's manual will take you 3 days a week through those books. So it'll tell you, like, on this day I'm going to read this 2-page spread and that 2-page spread. And then it comes with a kit of science experiments to do. And so you do those science experiments together, and all the supplies are there. I mean, like, every little bit of supplies are in the kit, and that's fantastic, super easy for the instructor, and especially an instructor that's got multiple kids, multiple subjects she's covering, or maybe you just don't particularly enjoy science yourself, but you don't want to let on to the kids. Now, Lucy Hammett has come out with so many bingo sets. I probably own 12 of them. I don't even know. There could be 50 of them for all I know. They are on every possible topic. There's one on just Washington State history. There's one on just science, but then there's more specific ones, like just on butterflies. And so I pulled out these two because they're science themed. And now the way you play this can really change how much of a lesson this is. So each kid gets a board like regular bingo, and you've got all these topics on there, and you've got these little tokens that come with, and typically you might just grab a card and say magnets, who has magnets, and then someone will mark it. But I never played it that way. I didn't show the kids a card. I would turn it over, and I would not say the keyword magnets. Instead, I would say this is something that has two ends known as poles. And then I'd pause and see if they're, get them thinking. If someone could guess it already, then we'd stop there. If they couldn't, I'd give them more clues. The poles are the strongest part of this thing. Planet Earth is like a huge one of these, having a north and a south pole. Similar or like poles will push each other away, and unlike poles will pull towards each other. The needle in a compass is one of these and always points towards this kind of north. And so usually before I got to the end of the description, someone would, from looking at their card, would know to say magnets, and they'd yell it out, and then everyone would mark magnets. Sometimes I'd finish reading the clue. And so occasionally the cards were something they were familiar with and that we'd studied already. Sometimes I would, and so this was a great review, and the kids would get very excited about trying to guess the answer before I got to the end of the clue. And sometimes it was a way that I introduced new information. We'd play the game maybe on a Monday and then spend the rest of the week looking at books from the library, watching brain pop videos online, just all things around, let's say, just magnets. And that was a really fun way. You didn't have to buy a teacher's manual and a curriculum. You just had this game and some free resources through the library and through the internet that allowed you to have a lot of fun. So I loved that. These are very inexpensive. I know they're available probably on Amazon, Rainbow Resource, all over the place. And I highly recommend them. Buy a couple, have your friends buy a couple of different ones, and then borrow and pass around. That's what my girlfriends and I did. So great resource. I'm always a fan of games anytime and free resources. Another way to learn without trying very hard are these plastic placemats. And so again, if there's a topic I was going to be teaching later that year, I would go ahead and buy the placemats in advance, have them on the table for lunches and dinners. I may or may not even make a point of saying what's on those cards. I just let the kids ask questions. Usually they get curious after a couple days. I also had like a periodic table of the elements shower curtain, and the amount of times someone would yell at me from the shower and say, "Mom, what's radium?" And I'd say, "Finish your shower. We'll look it up when you're done." Was always really fun. So those are some kind of passive ways to learn. Again, kids are so curious. And I don't have to have all the answers to all the questions they ask. I just have to help them find the answers to the questions they're asking. And again, I mean, between brain pop videos, that really was a favorite of mine. That's a subscription-based video. That they do a free video every day. So if you want to just kind of try it out, you can add the app to your phone or look at it on your computer. And every day just kind of see what the theme video is. They do a really good job of just a few minutes, keeping it really fun, but they use the proper vocabulary whenever they're talking about any topics. And so they're really introducing big ideas to kids. But placemats, shower curtains, videos online, great ways to introduce new ideas and to find the answers to their curious questions. I also, in the elementary level, like my main curriculum was going to the zoo. I have one son who is just passionate about animals. And so we got a zoo membership. That was our curriculum for 2 years on science. I didn't buy anything else except for a zoo membership. And I went ahead and photocopied the map to our local zoo, laminated it, spiral bound it with some pages that I made. I looked up, this is going to look elaborate, and some of you will be like, "Man, you're a crazy lady." But I really like spiral binding stuff because I'm a nerd that way. Anyhow, so I looked up all the animals that were at our zoo. So like, for example, the Suriname toad, and I have a big blank page for them to draw a picture, and I have habitat, size, diet, lifespan, today I learned, later I learned, and where I found my information, whether it was the internet, an encyclopedia, a book, or a video, or other. And so we would just, anytime we went to the zoo, we'd just pick an animal or two that we wanted to visit. And we would, this is the human, so my daughter drew a picture of herself, then wrote a little bit about herself. Let's see, let's find one, because we didn't finish it. But like, here's the polar bear. That was her drawing of the polar bear. And we brought this in a Ziploc baggie of colored pencils, sat in front of the animal of their choosing. They would draw a picture of what they saw, and then they would look around the exhibit for information that they could fill in and something that they learned either by observing or reading. And then when we got home, they had to look up one tidbit of information that was different than what they had learned at the zoo, and then where they got their information. So at the elementary level, this was a great way for them to learn how to do a little bit of research, be a little more observant in the places we went to. Again, you didn't have to buy a textbook curriculum. you can just use the resources that are available to you. With quarantine, for a lot of people, maybe your zoo's not open, so you can do something similar with, any pets that you have in the house, any wildlife that's in your own neighborhood, and things that you can expect to, maybe some native animals to your state. So just think a little bit about that. I mean, the documents itself took a little bit of activity, some time with Word, some printing, and then the spiral binding. Not everyone has a spiral binder. That's okay. They're not that expensive. I really love it. Thinks it's fun. All my friends borrow mine. If you're local, please feel free to come over and borrow mine. But if you don't have that, then of course, my mom always did construction paper on the front and back and stapled the sides, or a binder works just fine. Okay, so here's another resource that I've got. Apologia has a series of 3 zoology books. Now this is a textbook, which I'm not holding the textbook. This is their their notebooking journal that they come with. And I just wanted to point out how cool the journals are. All of the little tidbits of activities that are in the textbook that they recommend you do are already pre-printed for you and are already cut and paste, make little books. That's all in here in the back. And so we had to tear the pages out and then create our little pockets and stuff. But it literally, you buy the journal, everything you need is right there. You read the textbook pages, whatever pages you're doing, and you do the corresponding pages. Very easy. Again, my animal-loving child absolutely adored these books. Zoology 1 is Flying Creatures. My son eventually went from elementary school being passionate about animals, late elementary school being really inspired by birds, and has now graduated from high school and is working towards becoming an ornithologist, which is the study of birds. So lots of really great resources as far as just easy. You don't have to know the answers to all the questions in order to teach science. So those are some great resources. Now, moving to history, we did My Father's World curriculum, which is a faith-based curriculum. It does include some Bible, so if that doesn't work for you, this might not be the best match, but it was a good match for our family. And so here's just an example, Exploration 1850. This is the teacher's manual. And I just wanted to show you kind of how it's set up. It's really easy to follow. I had almost no science education growing up and very little history. What I did get was really spotty. I had a year where a teacher loved Egypt. We studied it like crazy. I had a lot of fun. I knew all about eating figs and pyramids, but I couldn't have found Egypt on the map, and I definitely didn't know what we were studying as far as timeline. Baez, can you plug this in? Because I think my phone's going to die soon. Anyhow, so really good resources. It's good to have good tools when you yourself don't feel proficient in an area. So if you're wanting more of a textbook, this teacher's manual will take specific books that they have you read, and then they just will tell you, so this is, okay, so let's see if I can find a good page. All right, so here's a good page, week 25, on your first day of the week, you may have some good Bible reading and whatnot. But you get down here, and Story of the World is a good book that takes you through chronologically through history from ancients to modern times. So on week 25, they're having you read a section that you're doing some notebook work. Botany, you're reading a different book, some pages, and then you're doing some art and other things. And then there's always a read aloud book that you're reading. And so on a day-to-day basis, I'm just following along in the teacher's manual and doing what it says. And sometimes I'm leaving stuff out because I'm not a rule follower, and I just use my curriculum as a backbone to inspire what we're doing. And sometimes it motivates me to do something more than I would before. So there's that. Getting into, so I wasn't really proficient in history, but I love geography. I love traveling the world. I love learning about new cultures. So here's a few resources that I loved for that. I feel like it's really hard to learn history out of the context of learning about where everything is located in the world. Baez, that should be long enough between the wall and here. Just go ahead, hold on. Let's get plugged in, get some more power going. And then I can keep going. And then when you're done, buddy, get me the globe that we like best. Okay, so this book is called Children Just Like Me. Who published it? It says UNICEF, but I think it's a DK book. And great book, especially for your young ones, to kind of introduce them to not just cultures of the world, but children of those worlds. So it'll tell them a little bit about what they eat and how they live and their schools. And it has photos of children from those countries, some crafts. And this is a lot of fun. My kids love poring over this. When they were really little, we just had it on their little book basket, and they would read it when they felt like it. When they got a little older and we were starting to study these different countries, we would find the 2-page spread on whatever country we were studying and read that section, even if we'd read it years before, to kind of remind them a little bit about some of the things. And they have new questions when they revisit, so it's always good. Here's another book series that I absolutely adore. It's called If I Lived In, and then there will be a country. So Spain was our first one to buy. They also have Japan, France. At least those are the ones that we own. And let's see, it's from Longstreet Press, it looks like. And so really loved these books, and it'll go page by page. So like, if I lived in Spain, I'd have a new goal to speak perfect Spanish called Español. And then there will be a couple of words at the bottom to learn. So that's fun. In the morning, I wake. Buenos dias, I say, as I greet my mama and my father, padre. And so it just takes, it goes with some children through their day, and then introduces some of their cultural stuff, some of their foods, and then also some words. So this is a great one. Again, if you're introducing a new country, your kid's asking about countries, these are ones that I liked enough that I went ahead and bought, and we used quite a bit, but that's because it's part of my passion. Not this one, buddy, the beach ball globe. Get that one. Okay, so next I have some more games, because if it can be a game, if we can learn it as a game, I'm going to teach it as a game. So Geopuzzle has a whole set of puzzles. Each puzzle piece is shaped as the country and is labeled, and so that's great. And again, so maybe, I don't know, maybe older elementary, unless your younger elementary just loves these kinds of puzzles. Great way to see how things border each other and their shapes and whatnot. So that was fun. We played a lot with this. And then here's another one. It's called 10 Days in Asia. It's a whole series. They have 10 days in Europe, 10 days in the Americas. Now this game, you have, let's see if I can show it to you. You have a board that covers the land area that that particular game is for. And then they have connections. China Air would fly this way, China Railroad. And then you have these, let's see, you have lots of cards, and you have these trays. So days 1 through 5, and then days 6 through 10. Now, if I've got younger players or not very much time, we're just going to do days 1 through 5. Okay, so that just makes the whole game half as long. And then each card either has a country on it, or let's see if I have one here, a mode of transportation. I'm not seeing any on top. But the mode of transportation might be a plane, a train. You see there's the railroad. And so basically you have to put countries in order based off of looking at your map, and say, like, I'm going to start in, if I got dealt a card for China and a card for Russia, since they do share a border over here in the northeast by Mongolia, then I can take it by railroad. I can go that way. I could fly, you know, but to get from China to, let's say, Indonesia, I have to fly because they don't share a border. So it really helps them looking at the map critically. My kids love this so much that they spend a lot of time making up imaginary trips through the world that they were going to take someday together. So that's a fun way to learn about countries, learn about how they border. And like I said, if you have younger players or you don't have much time, start with just 5 days instead of 10 days. Okay, my favorite globe. Lots of people have globes on stands that are hard. I have this beach ball that has satellite imaging on it, so there are no political boundary lines. And what's great about this is no matter what age you're teaching, no matter what time period you're teaching, like I could be teaching about the Fertile Crescent and Babylon, and then flip straight over into, modern days countries like United Arab Emirates, whatever, I can still use this globe and it's always going to be accurate because this is just the satellite imaging. And you can see things like the Sahara Desert, right? And so instead of finding where we live in the United States because it's a specific color on your globe or it says the words United States over it, instead they're turning it and they're having to pay closer attention to different peninsulas and shorelines. And so this was great. When they first ever were learning where something was, I mean, maybe it took them a time or two more than it would have if they could read the words or identify a color. But once they knew it, they knew it. I mean, my daughter got to a point where she could find things based off of coastlines, mountain ranges, deserts. I could throw this across the room and yell Saudi Arabia, and she can find it immediately. Indonesia, she could find it immediately. When she was finding our state, which is Washington State, she was coming up the coastline and looking for the Puget Sound. And so this is just a really fun way to play while also teaching geography in a way that isn't specific to any political time periods that may change boundary lines. So fun times with that. Okay, a few more things. Timelines. Oh, let's jump over here. This is the textbook for land animals by Apologia that there would also be another journal for, much like the one I showed you before. So very much a textbook. If you don't love textbooks, it is one. But at the end of each chapter, you're going to get into like some little suggested activities. Left to my own devices, I'm probably not going to do any of these activities, but because I bought the journals and all that stuff was pre-printed for me, nice and easy, we did quite a few more activities than we would have otherwise, and that makes it more fun for kiddos. So recommend that wholeheartedly. Okay, this is a timeline game. There's several of them. This particular one's American history. All it is a box full of little cards that have events in this case, American history. And then on the back of that card, it has the year that event took place, okay? So your kid may not be familiar with all of these events. You may not be familiar with all of these events, and that's okay. So you might want to just pull out the ones you're familiar with, or you might want to test yourself and do more. But the goal of the game is you get dealt some cards, and then you have to put them in chronological order without flipping them over and looking at the year given. You use the year given in order to check your timeline when you think it's correct. But you could play with the entire box of cards all at once, or you could just pull out the cards that your kids are familiar with. So that's a great idea. I showed you with my Father's World, they use a variety of books, Usborne books, various textbooks. It depends on the grade and the subject. One of the things they'll use is Story of the World. Story of the World's one that lots of people use, regardless of whether my Father's World uses it. There's lots of curriculums that utilize the Story of the World books. It's a 4-volume set that goes from, like I said, from ancient times all the way up to modern times. This is volume 3, so it's the early modern times. It's written in more of a storybook kind of narrative, and it goes through chronologically. So each chapter will always reference the chapter before it to kind of create those connections as to, and then this happened, and then this happened, and on the other side of the world at the same time, this happened. Really good. I love it in audiobook format. We used to listen to it in the car. When we did road trips on the East Coast, I would pre-pick the exact tracks that corresponded with, like, when we went and visited Gettysburg, I wanted to listen to the chapters that referred to Civil War type stuff and Gettysburg. So great resource, makes it really easy. Again, you don't have to know all the answers. You're learning right alongside your kids. You're just reading together. You're being curious, and you're having good resources to look up answers or people to ask. Okay, few more things. I know this is a long video, but I have, again, more placemats of various subjects that you could have some passive learning happening. Draw and write through history. This one's just it goes from the Vikings, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance. And so just really fun learning how to draw a catapult or learning how to draw a dragon. Some kids are very artistic and don't need inspiration. Some want to be artistic, but could really use some inspiration, some direction. If you have a hands-on child, dress up, drawing, play acting, Playmobil, recreating scenes in Legos, all of those things are great ways to learn and reinforce. Another thing that I absolutely adore are these famous figures books. These guys, actually, you can photocopy or cut out the characters, and then you use little brads to put them together. Let me see if I have any that are put together. I've got that Civil War one, American Revolution. Oh yeah, we got lots here. And you can see, like, you can do them in black and white so that they can color them, or you can print out the colored ones. I had one kid who absolutely despised coloring, so we always printed out the pre-colored ones. No reason to make, school's supposed to be fun, right? Learning is supposed to be fun. But man, they would play with these for hours, and as you can see, we've still saved them. And they would just reenact all kinds of stories from Story of the World, and or for wherever they were learning. So lots of fun with that. I really recommend that, again, for those hands-on kids. If you have a kid who's having a really hard time listening to long readings, maybe Story of the World, or you're reading from a different chapter book, having them do coloring or drawing or these famous figures things is a great idea. Okay, the last thing I want to show you, this is it, which is good because I want to keep it under 30 minutes, is this add a century timeline. There's so many different ways to do a timeline. You can staple things to your wall. You can do big presentation boards that fold out. I think I've done everything at some point in the last 13 to 15 years of teaching. But add a century timeline, we eventually went to that. It's a huge binder, and it comes with all these pages, and you can take them out, and then they connect to each other. Can you see that? How they connect. So you can actually spread it way out and look at it all. But you determine which years you're covering, because you get all these stickers. And then it also has it kind of divided by subject up the left, but I never attached those because our stuff just went all over the place. As you can see, it's super messy. Why? Because things started overlapping. We had too many pages. I ended up not using this for 1 year, but for like probably the last 10 years we've used this book. And so you can easily see which years we did a lot of study. Like, let's see, here we go. My son this last year was doing, what was he doing? Kind of the up to modern times time frame. So the 1800s are really full to where we just put a piece of tape at the top of each one so that they could be flaps so we could fit more. Because he is in high school. We had a lot more subjects to cover than we did at the elementary level. And anyhow, but I just stick them in there. I stopped trying to be a perfectionist about my timeline. I bought this add a century timeline, and I just started sticking things in there and moving on. And we reference it all the time to the point where some of these pages, their connections have kind of come apart, and I'll need to retape them if I ever needed to hold it out as one long thing. But we've spread it out all the way down the hallway just to look at, how things are related to each other. And it's fun because when you're looking at multiple cultures, you'll have things happening. Like, let's say a lot of times history in the United States will be pretty heavily focused on European history. And we spent part of our year last year focusing on some African history. And it was really fun to see what things were happening at the same time in different parts of the world, and just kind of compare, and what's going on in South America at the same time as this thing in Africa, at the same time as this thing in Europe and the colonies. So timelines are great, and especially, again, for the parent that does not feel proficient themselves, you don't have to be. You just start by learning one thing. You read it in a 2-page spread in an Usborne book. You read a chapter in Story of the World. You watched a Brain Pop video. Get a sticky note. Get a half an index card. Write that thing in a date. Stick it on a piece of paper or on your wall. And then the next thing you learn, does it come before or after that? The next thing you learn, does it come before or after or between those two things? And little by little, you start kind of organizing your thoughts in your mind and starting to see connections. Don't be discouraged if you don't see connections in the first week or month or a couple of months. It's over the course of the years, over the course of your studies, that you're going to start seeing the really cool connections and having really deep conversations with your kids about their world and about themselves and how they fit in this world. And start noticing things like on your, on my satellite image globe, like, oh, this is a peninsula just like that other spot is a peninsula, They start using vocabulary like that. So I encourage everybody to not be intimidated by subjects that you did not learn well. or that you think that you don't know much about, we have such amazing resources in the world today. You can teach your children well. All it takes is a really loving parent who's willing to answer questions they don't know by getting help from other resources. And so as long as you love your kids, you're going to be the most devoted teacher available to teach them. So happy teaching this year. I hope everyone has a great year.